Michael Train, NRM's Project Catalyst Coordinator, where he manages his own cane farm while supporting the other growers in Project Catalyst. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I hope we're all bright and alert and bushy-tailed and all that. Can't say it looks that way from up here, but first of all, I'd like to introduce Evan Shannon. I think Evan's well known to most of us. Evan works for Pharmacist now, and Evan will be following on from Emma Carlos's talk yesterday about the Reef Report Card, but he's going to be doing it looking at it at a grower's level and how it affects growers. Thank you, Evan.
Thanks, Michael. I guess after seeing the report card yesterday for the Whitsundays, many growers that I speak to, are sort of, a bit doubtful about what that actually means to them. And it's all very well having an amalgamated report card, but on my farm, what can I do? And is that actually my pesticides or nutrients causing the issue? So what we've done is we've actually moved to a paddock scale. I'd just like to acknowledge the cooperators. 3 of the 4 are here. So Del Santo Farming, Mudjigger and Company, Family Trust, Christopher's, and Wilmar Farms. And so without these guys, helping me out, I could never have done this work. So the stuff we'll be talking about, the activities, we're looking at 2 products for pre-emerge for plant cane, and these are widely used in the bird and 1 late plant. 2 of the UV stable herbicides. These are being floated around as replacements for the PS2s, and I have some real concerns about that. And last year we spoke about metribuzin as a replacement for diaron. I'm not going to go through that again, but we've redone that work, and for our growers and for most growers, if you've got irrigation and you're going to be putting on water after you've applied this product, if you can wait 4 days rather than 2, you halve the product being lost. So we couldn't have done this work without these event samplers. So all this is reliant upon little KP samplers, which have been put together by BIFMAC, the local NRM group in the Burdekin, and certainly some of these are floating around up and down the state now. Really cheap, with a little float here to activate the suction, and it goes into a storage bottle here. These are the new units, the Series 2 KPs. So we can actually program them to actually extract so many mils per whatever. In this instance, most of them we're taking 100 mils every between 120 and 300 seconds. So you get a sample over an event. Okay, it might be hours, it might be 2 hours, it might be 6 hours, depending on the runoff characteristics of that soil. So all this has been driven for us in the Burdekin by Barratta Creek exceedances. So the 2 areas that seem to be, always in the news, Sandy Creek in the Whitsundays and the Barrattas. Now this graph here, this figure, basically it's metallochlor and atrazine. So for those of you further than about the second table back, won't be able to read the label, what we've got, the triangles are atrazine and the little squares are metallochlor. Metallochlor is the active ingredient in either Jewel Gold or Clincher. So we were getting a hiding over these exceedances since 2013 is here, 14 and 15. This was the trigger value for metallochlor up until recently, and as you can see, there were a heap of exceedances here. Now, they've actually changed the goalposts on us for whatever reason, and we can't get any explanation yet. The trigger value, or the new guideline value, has been raised. So it's raised from 0.02 micrograms per litre to 0.7, which is a massive increase. It's 35 times, so we're allowed to have 35 times more chemical going out. But whatever, that's the new guideline value, they're calling it. So we've still got quite a few above it. So the question is, what can we do to reduce those exceedances? So we could capture all our runoff water and we've got 70% capture in that area already, but we've still got 30% that haven't got recycling. There isn't much recycling in the Delta either. Remembering the Bradders is the only place in the whole Burdekin, the whole 90,000 hectares, there's only 13,000 that gets picked up by this monitoring site, okay? So the departments have really toned back the monitoring, so that's the only site, okay? So obviously there's certainly 70% recycling in the upstream of the Bradders, but we've still got 30% that aren't recycled, and when you've got rainfall events, obviously you lose it anyway. We could avoid using residuals such as Metallochlor or dual gold, but in plant cane they're so useful, really useful. And then they minimise having to use products like Azulux, you know, at 18 or 20 bucks a litre. You know, Metallochlor is, you know, you're talking probably $25 a hectare to use that product. So it's a really cheap alternative. There's alternative products out there like pendimethalin or Stomp Extra. And, you know, Stomp Extra, you know, some growers sort of start, you know, quivering when I start talking about it. You know, it's a chemical that obviously, you know, those who've used it, it stains everything. It stains you, stains your tractor, stains your boots. But it does work really well. But the point was we didn't really know the data. We thought pendimethalin would be better. By its nature, it actually locks on the clay particle a lot better than dual gold does. But we didn't actually know that, and we needed some numbers. Following the exceedance issues we've had, we actually formed a Bradder Creek Action Group, and you can see the players in this. So the growers, irrigators, reps were in it, DAF, BIFMAC, the local NRM group, Wilmar, BPS and ourselves. And we put together a really nice project, but no one would fund it. We wanted to take this data and go on farm and see what we could do to minimise not only those products, but obviously Diron as well, and there's other products out there, as well as the nutrients. But we just couldn't get anybody to fund it. However, DAF did come to the party with a small amount of money, but it was enough to get us going, and then Reef Catchments gave us a sizable amount, which really, without these two funding groups, we couldn't have done this work at all. So, you know, it really is to be applauded. And the first thing we needed to test was the Metallochlor and pendimethalin. So, in the Burdekin, that's the sort of stage when we use these products. So we'll put on either you know, a Metallochlor, dual gold, with atrazine, just before the second irrigation, or if there's a rainfall event coming. And so what we did here, we've sprayed this paddock with gramoxone. So it's clean, you can see the dead grass in here. So we've got a conventional, you know, 48-20 spraying here, doing 16 rows at a time. And we put down replicates of either dual gold with atrazine or Stomp Extra with atrazine, okay, in a real paddock situation here. So we had part of the trial was on this side of that block of cane, and the other half was on the other side. We had rain coming. We were forecast to have 20 to 40 mils coming, okay, so the grower wasn't actually even in the Burdekin when I did these trials. I rang him up and said, mate, we've got some rain coming, maybe 20 mil, maybe 30 mil. Can we put some residual out? He said, yeah, do it. He was out camping with his kids. So I grabbed his worker and away we went, and we put these trials down, and we had rain. We were fairly sure we were going to get something, you know, 20 to 40 for 2 days in a row. We had a little more than that. That was on the first day. We had 60 mils, and this is Bill McAllister stomping through on one of our reps. So we had some runoff, and the KPs worked nicely. We hadn't expected the next night, though. We had 120 mil the next night. Now, the chances of getting 180 mils on the 18th and 19th of May in the Burdekin are sort of, you know, zip. So the KPs in here, you can see them like little tortoises with the little bottles just out of the water. So we had some pretty good data to run with here. It does show us, though, the unreliability of our rainfall predictions, okay? Now, I've been in the Burdekin for 37 years, and I've never seen that sort of rainfall event, you know, in May, for God's sake. And the cane did survive, believe it or not. So we've got some real good numbers coming out. So these are the rainfall events, the first two big fellas. And just look at the Metallochlor here. These are micrograms per litre. The real thing to look at is the differences. Forget the numbers, but the guideline value for Metallochlor is 0.7. So at no stage did we actually get down to 0.7. You know, we talked about, you know, hundreds of micrograms per litre to start with. Pendimethalin is 2 orders of magnitude less, you know, a heap less coming out. By the way, atrazine over here, you know, you can see atrazine is quite high. It's actually higher than the Metallochlor, but it plummets really quickly. The guideline values for atrazine in a waterway is about 13, okay? So it gets down really quickly. But the point was we had orders of magnitude difference between these products. By the time we get down to Hillup in here, you know, the pendimethalin is almost completely missing from the analysis. One of the problems of pendimethalin is you can't use the generic test. So you get a generic test and it'll have atrazine and every, you know, chemical known to mankind except pendimethalin. It's separate own test and it costs $160 a shot for that one. So, you know, a lot of the recording, they don't pick up pendimethalin because it's too damn expensive. So we did the same trial in the Delta as well, in Jarvis Field, and on those same days. And you can see the numbers, instead of being 590, it's down a little bit. But the same order of magnitude. There's more pendimethalin coming off in the Delta, but it's probably because the soils have less clay. The cation exchange capacity of the Briar site was about 26. This one varies from 6 to 16. So, you know, it's a lot lighter clay, so the pendimethalin doesn't get latched on the clay. Well, there's less clay for it to latch on. And there may be some losses here with deep drainage, okay, because we're in the Delta here. The Briar site, there'll be almost no deep drainage. And the atrazine is similar. So yeah, they run pretty much like the Briar site, just the numbers a little bit different. But the point is we're losing a lot less pendimethalin than Metallochlor. We did the same thing again in Lake Plant in Clare, up on the front soil. Now it's a Briar farm, but it's actually very much like the Delta, sandy loam soils. And the numbers are very similar to what that other Delta one was, okay? I think the only thing, oh yeah, I threw the imidacloprid in as well because, you know, this is a farm that has, you know, real grub issues. So they've gone in and put Susquehanna Maxi Intel on in here, okay? And you can see imidacloprid's kicked as it should, the product's coming out. And then she runs along and we had another rainfall event and it kicks again. Rainfall certainly does kick things along. But anyway, the point was much the same as the Delta site. Numbers are a little bit different, but, and I'll talk about the efficacies of the products, but similar to what that Delta site was. In summary, a lot less pendimethalin comes out the paddock than the Metallochlor, and it's a lot safer to the environment. We haven't mentioned these figures, this Metallochlor and pendimethalin, this PC95 GV is 95% of aquatic organisms can handle a value of whatever it is. So the smaller the number, the nastier is the product. So 0.71 is the Metallochlor and 2.3 is the pendimethalin. So the pendimethalin is about 3 times safer to the environment, roughly, okay? So we've got a fraction of it coming out and it's a lot safer. The downside I mentioned is, you know, Stomp Extra or pendimethalin, you know, it's a dirty orange colour, it stains everything, and it's more expensive. You know, pendimethalin actually came out of the paint industry in France, you know, over 50 years ago, and they can't take the colour out without taking out the efficacy of the product. But we've spoken last week, Rob Miller and I ran shed meetings. We had 107 growers at those 7 meetings, and we presented this data, even with the costings, and there wasn't a dissenting voice. Now, some of the growers may have not agreed with us, but certainly weren't going to tell us. But by and large, most growers were quite willing to spend $20 a hectare more for a product that would do the same job and cause less impacts off-site. So I think, you know, growers are to be applauded. However, in the winter months, there's no problem. They're equally efficient. And the efficacy is much the same. In fact, exactly the same. But in late plant, there's a problem with both products. They tend to break down too quickly with UV. So they'll do about an 85, 90% job late plant. But that's not good enough in late plant. You've still got a problem. You've still got to come back with Azure. So we need to test the efficacy again. But look, we've had a major change already in the Burdekin. One of the main resellers this year told me his sales last year of Metallochlor versus Stomp, they were 50-50 up until last year. And last year it was a major change. It was about 90% Stomp and about 10% Dual Gold. So I think growers are to be applauded for that. They've actually moved already. We gave them an insight into this data a year ago, not having the full story, mind you, and they went with it. And for all my recommendations now, I'm not using any Dual Gold. If I can use Stomp, I'll use it. Okay. The other one we ran with, we've got major problems in the Burdekin with wild sorghum. You know, there's lots of paddocks like this. This is on the way to Alva Beach. You know, it's really, really causing us some issues. It's been spread, birds, machinery, it's getting everywhere. Now, obviously, we're using these UV-stable herbicides like Balance, and those of you who've used Balance, you've seen effects like that on your cane. However, we didn't have any figures as to the relative effects coming off paddocks. We knew the relative toxicologies of things like Balance and Flame were probably worse than the PS2 herbicides, leaving Velpar out of it. But, you know, atrazine, and Diron, sorry, probably Diron is up there. But, you know, atrazines and amitrins and metribuzins and whatever are certainly less toxic to the marine and aquatic environment than probably Balance and Flame. But we didn't know what the runoff characteristics were. So we did 2 trials, one in February of 17, and we're picking up DKN, which is the active, the breakdown product of Balance. And this is a Mazepec, which is Flame or Impose or Spark. There's a whole heap of generics of a Mazepec these days. And you can see here, you know, the numbers are certainly, there's more DKN coming off than the Mazepec, you know, orders of magnitude difference. Still not great numbers, still not very high. However, I threw in the Metallochlor. This was in February of 17, and the grower who's in the room right now, he said to me, I said, how long since you put on Dual Gold? And he said, oh, this was second return. He said, in bloody plain cane. He'd put it on in August of 14, and you're still picking up a bit of Metallochlor in the background. Now, it's not a problem level, but it's still there. Okay, so some of these products will hang around for a long time. They may not be effective on weed control, but they're in the background. So those numbers, they don't mean very much to me either, but if you start looking at the proportion that were lost, and this is on a ground that has got good water penetration, so it soaks really well, and that's a problem for us in the Delta. If it doesn't soak, we have some issues. But where it soaked pretty well, we lost about, you know, I think 175 grams you put on, we lost about 5% of the product. The Mazepec was a fair bit less. We put on 300 mils and we lost, less than, you know, 0.22%. So, look, the numbers are, you know, percent. It could be 2%, it could be 8%. It depends on the runoff and how much water's coming off, and we've used some guesstimates of that. But I think we've been fairly conservative. The point was there wasn't much coming off. However, with these dry years, we've had some real soakage problems in the Delta, particularly. So you can see here, this is a drone shot that Alice took 2 weeks ago. And so this is standing cane, where it hasn't soaked well. And you can see the better growing cane where it's lodged, okay? Strips all through it. When we get these dry years in the Burdekin with photo irrigation, with pure water, we have some major issues with water penetration. So it just doesn't soak into the hill. So we didn't mean to do a trial to work out what chemical was lost under these conditions, but that's what we've got. So when we put on, sorry, just going back to water penetration, this is a shot, and it doesn't show that well with these lights on, but this is just near town, and you can see we're cutting cane here, which is up, you know, near the extractor. And as we're coming forward, the cane height is down to there, just on top of the bull bars. So we're talking about cane about yay high. That's what water penetration will do, okay? So we've got a paddock there that's going from probably, you know, 100 tonne per hectare to about 20 or 30 tonne per hectare. just from soakage. And that's on the banks of Klondike. So it's really close into town and some of the best soils in the world, really. But without soakage, you'll grow nothing, okay? And that's a pretty extreme example. And that guy's gone in there with gypsum now and a fallow crop and probably growing 180 tonne per hectare. But without that soakage being sorted out, you'll grow nothing. So what we end up doing here, so we've got just the two products, and you can see here the DKN, it starts off quite high, and these are irrigation driven, of course, until we get down to here. But you can see it's dropping away, 29, 11, 2.9, 1.7. We get rainfall, see they jump? So the chemical is sitting up on top of the hill, not going into the ground because of the water soakage problem. Get rainfall, out it comes. And it's the same with your Mazepec, although the numbers are obviously less. You can see the kick here. We're dropping, much the same, and we've kicked, okay? We've come up 3 or 4 times. So obviously chemical is sitting up there. Now, how much are we losing? And this was the scary bit. When we do some guesstimates, we actually did some measurements on this farm as to how much was being applied, and we reckon we were losing over 30% of the product, okay? Because it was just sitting up on top of the hill. The Mazepec was less, but it's still a real problem. So this is something we'd never thought about before. We've never considered it. My wife's a teacher, and I showed her the data, and I said, what do you reckon? She said, oh, it's just obvious, isn't it? Of course it'll sit up there. But we think about soakage problems from a crop growth point of view, but we really haven't thought about the issues with pesticides. I've certainly seen it with nutrients, where we have stranded fertiliser before, and it'll sit up there, get a rainfall event or a couple of rainfall events, and out it'll come. But this is the first time I've actually measured it with pesticides. So we really do need to investigate this further, this coming season, and do some trials with ameliorants, with or without ameliorants for some of these pesticides, particularly the UV stable ones, because they're going to hang around, obviously. Things like, metallochlor or pendimethalin, they're not going to hang around. Even atrazine. Atrazine under high UV, maybe 13, 14 days. That's all you got. But the UV stable ones, it's a different ballgame. So getting back to finish on the pendimethalin and metallochlor, there's certainly a lot less pendimethalin coming off, and it's a lot safer to the environment. And from my perspective, we need to try and minimise, the use of metallochlor. Mario.
Evan, what's your organic carbon in the bird?
Yeah, not good. I think they were from 0.4 to about 0.9, all those trials. Yeah.
What's your suggestion when you've got organic carbon sitting between 3.5 and 6?
Yeah.
Doesn't work.
No, the stomp won't work on those conditions. You're going to have to use other things, mate. Either knockdown or the UV stable stuff.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
We use dual gold because of that sole reason.
Yeah. No, that's true. That's true. You've got no options there, Mario. You've got no options, mate. Stomp is going to be deactivated. Yeah.
Because we were using stomp.
Yeah. Con.
You mentioned a link between chemicals sitting there not activated and being washing off with first rain event, etc. Well, first of all, do you know that it's an actual link between not soaking properly and the excess runoff? And number two, if it is that, is it as simple as putting on gypsum?
Yeah. Look, I think we intuitively, the chemicals sitting up there, these things will sit around for months, as you can see, and rainfall will take them out. We're obviously not, we haven't done, capacitance probes sitting in those hills. I think, though, if we can, anecdotally, if we can get that ground to soak, I think we'll actually reduce those losses enormously. But we need to test that this year, Con. We need to test it. And how much do we need? You know, the problem with in the delta is if we put on too much of those products, we can't get our furrows through. Okay, so we'll enhance the deep drainage. So we go from one extreme to the other quite quickly, and there's no magic figure. It's a matter of testing the water. You can't just jump on and look at Gypsy, because those sort of products, sorry, those sort of systems, programs are designed for acidicity. You know, our soakage problems are related to the sand, silt, clay ratio, the fragile nature of our soil, and the pure water. So a little bit of salt in our water will actually help. A little bit of salt will help flocculate the edge of the hill, let it go in, but it's because we've got very pure water in some cases and fragile soil, the combination, is a perfect storm for soakage issues.
We need to wrap it up there. If you've got any questions, can we just, we're pushing for time. Did you get good weed control?
Yeah, Terry, we got brilliant weed control in the early plant with both products. However, it wasn't so good with the late plant, as I said, about 85%, which is not good enough. So we had to come back with a bit of Azulux to clean it up, and we've actually used a low rate of balance as a pre-merge. Yeah, if we knew, if we knew, and that's what we're going to do. We've actually mapped that area. We've got an EM map already, so we will be using that EM map and some other techniques, other layers to try and do a prescription. It'll be a prescription, all right.
Thank you, Evan. Well done, Evan. I think the room's looking a bit brighter now, so I don't know whether it was you or the Barocca, but something's working and they're brightening up. You're looking a brighter light at the moment, so that's good. Well done. Our next speaker is John Turner. John Turner's going to be presenting a project that Phil DeGuara is part of, and Phil will be up here too. And they're talking about a demonstration trial, where he's looking at mud on his fallow crop. So he's looking at the rates and the benefits and that sort of thing. So thank you.
What we don't get is a tutor on how to drive the gear. You been here before? No? Back? Just the middle one. Righto. Thanks. So what Phil has virtually done is he's decided that mud is a good part of his farming management system. So it's a matter of he's moving forward using mud in the fallows. And the real question, all we want to work out is the subsurface or on the surface for mud, and then the same thing for ash. What the benefits are compared to just using mud. So it's not a question of, are we going to use mud? It's a matter of the best way to use mud. And so that's where this demonstration trial was birthed. Oops, this one. So where are we? We're down in Mackay. Phil's about, I suppose, half an hour out of Mackay in Brightly area, which is near Eaton. So this is just an aerial shot of the trial. And the trial is running from about this area across to here and runs down the middle. And we've got an EM map just to show the variation through this block. But the trial does run right through, and so we've sampled right through and sent that bulk sample to the mill. So it's quite a lot of cane going for each trial or each treatment. That's just a layout of the trial, so you can understand that we actually do plan. And each one is 3 rows. So I guess why do the demo trial? And what are the drivers for looking at subsurface placement? With water quality being a much bigger issue to the growers and to the community, how much better is it to be putting the material under the ground? And does that effort to put it under the ground go further than the cost. And also there's been a trend over the last several years in Mackay, especially towards lower rates, and that, we're still seeing good results with that, and so therefore it's easier to put a lower rate subsurface than it is to jam in 150 plus. And also with controlled traffic farming, that's what Phil's on controlled traffic farming. It's more encouraging to know that you're working on that same spot year in, year out. Each time you come back for a fallow, you can be adding more mud or ash, knowing that you're improving that growing zone, rather than just spreading it across the whole area of the block. So what were some of the expected outcomes? The amount of mud that we're putting in, hoping to get close to the full phosphorus content for that crop cycle. Obviously it depends on what your starting base is, but it does make it a lot easier in the management of your return nutrient program if you can put that mud in at the beginning and know that your blends from then on in don't have to manage it. Because during that peak period when you're going crazy, putting out fertiliser and stuff like that, if you've got a multiple blends that you're trying to manage, it's obviously harder, whereas if we know that we've only got to match up 3 nutrients, it makes life a lot easier. Also, there's some sodic areas and drainage issues on Phil's farm, so it does a lot of ash buried as well, and that should improve the textures. So what are some of the properties that we're hoping to get better? If we're putting it in that same zone, obviously cultivation reduction should be there. I'm hoping that we'll see crop resistance improving too, because we've been pushing the carbon up. We're getting better organic matter, more microbes. We should have less cyclic, wetting and drying. That should be smoothed out. Also, microorganism population crashing and breeding up again should be smoothed out. So that should, we should see crop uniformity improved. So just a little bit of how it's done. This is a bed former and the furrow former. So at the moment, that's just forming the furrow for the mud or ash to be dumped into. So you can see that it's gone through and it's left this furrow 300 mil plus. And so they're just running along on top of the mound that was formed, dropping the mud in. This is going in at 50 tonne to the hectare at the moment. Doesn't look like very much really. When you start putting out small amounts of chicken manure and stuff like that, you can hardly actually see it. And then they run through with that same piece of equipment and bury over form the bed over the top of where the mud was just dumped, and you've got your bed formed ready to go. And that's what it looks like afterwards. So the nutrients that were put through the four treatments were all done as, I'm not going to go through each one, but just to let you know, they're all nice and even. It was all matched up by Phil to make sure that there was no bias between any different treatments. So, we had mud surface, mud subsurface, ash surface, mud surface, and then mud and ash at 50 tonnes each, plus a control. And this is just a core, probably a bit hard to see, but you can. This is in one of the mud ash location. We cored everywhere, but it's no good putting up 8 different cores. You won't be able to tell what's going on. All I did is put the mud ash, and that's where the ash is still. I mean, it's in a soft component around the just under 200, which surprised me a little bit, but it's still there. It's definitely, that's a moister area and very friable, and this was just one of the controls, and it's just held together all the way through. So it's still physically there. And this sample was taken as first return. So when we harvest it as plant cane, apart from, for whatever reason, I can't tell you why, the mud ash at the higher rate was lower than the rest. Really, you know, there's not much difference. We don't have this replicated, which is one of the things that we're going to improve on. But, you know, over here, just the normal fertiliser regime, plus the buried mud and surface products, there's nothing coming out as yet to say, yep, you're on a winner. So this was in plant cane. So with looking at that and also going, well, we need to have something a bit more robust, Phil has gone through and produced another trial for this year, which has got replications and it's a lot more involved. And so I'm sure that this information will be presented in years to come. But this is what this demonstration trial has shown us, that we need to have, you know, more reps. So we've gone for a 4 replicated. This is an ash trial, and this is a mud trial here. Now, all the economists, just cover your ears, because we just did a quick, what's the differences between some of the treatments, and that's the cost we threw in, and then the products that we use, just to give you some sort of gauge of what was the costing, and based on yield. So the blue is the nutrient cost, and then the orange line was just a comparison between what the lowest cost was. I just made that or the lowest return, sorry, at 0, and so this is increasing return on the other treatments. So, you know, the mud ash subsurface and the control are way up there at the end. So at this stage, you know, we're hoping to see some controls later in the life of the buried mud, because it's not painting a really good story just right now. But it's not. We didn't expect it either. So, you know, it's early days for the mud and everything. So some of the conclusions, like I just said, the advantages of it weren't manifested in the first year. We figured that the cost of actually making the furrow, which was the only part that was different, the other gear for making the mounds and everything is all still the same equipment. So there's no special equipment that Phil has to have to put it in the ground, and that cost him $22 an hour, and that's just the labour. So the equipment we didn't bother factoring in. So we are going to establish that trial. That's one of the conclusions. And also, you know, we might be able to tinker with the rates a bit more as we get a better understanding. When we know what the soil starting rate is, do we push up the mud a little bit, which means we can get through the crop cycle, or do we bring it down? We've also got to deal with the variation of mud in amongst all that too, which makes it a little bit harder. So that's the results there for us. Any questions for Phil? We've got one up the back here. I'll zip you with the laser so we know who was chosen.
Phil, Tony Bajaya. Phil, with your control, I'm guessing you did nothing at all, just left it as it is?
The control was just conventionally just ripped and speed tilled. Oh, it was ripped twice, speed tilled, just like, conventional, I suppose. And then the other control was just opened up and then closed again without putting the mill mud in.
The way you open it up, do you think you would be actually bringing soda closer to the top?
In that trial there, it's all it's on a creek flat. That was the other thing I wanted to see, if in our better soils, if it actually made a difference to yield. But I don't know. We'll see when we do this next replicator trial and see what happens with it. But we haven't seen any negative effects from doing the subsurface in the sodic areas yet. And we're up to second return in some of it now. So the cane's still there, so I don't know, something's working.
Yeah, fair enough.
With some of the dispersion tests we've done, it's getting close to some of that sodic being around that 300, 400. So it is a possibility. But but I doubt whether it'll be a major impact on us. Because we've improved the drainage, I think it'll just wash it out again.
Righto, thanks. Lou?
Yeah, it's Lou Ratteri. Phil, I've just got a comment to make. There's another value in burying that filter press. We do the same. We buried it like you did and mounted it up, and after Cyclone Debbie, that little Sheila didn't take it away. She took the mounds. Yeah. The filter press was still there.
Well, that block there actually went under probably, or at least a metre or metre and a half of water, fast-flowing water, and I was worried about it still tipping. That's what I was, because you make the furrow, everything's nice and soft. I was expecting to be nothing left, but it all stayed in there, and it probably cut one of the best crops that block has cut in years for some reason.
Phil, Rob Benassi. Nutrient value out of the mill mud ash. Do you check the nutrients coming in onto the farm in that product? And if so, is it consistent? And second question, when you're applying at what rate you're putting it out, are you allowing for the amount of water that's in it? Because there's a lot of people have been talking about mill mud in the last 2 days, and we're all talking 80 tonne, 100 tonne, 40 tonne. But in my experience, in the last couple of years doing exactly what you're doing, we're finding between 15 and 20% of water coming onto the farm. So you're actually not putting your 100, you're only back down to 80, 85 tonne, which is added to the cost. We're paying for water coming onto the farm, and really it's lost because we're not really chasing the water for our fallows.
Well, what I'm led to believe is that in the water there's still a lot of nutrient value. I'd rather get it wet than dry. Because that little bit of there's what I've been told. There's a little bit of nutrients, or a fair bit of nutrients, still in the water itself. As for the testing it, no, I don't test it every year. We've sort of got a basic or pretty conservative values that we use. It's around for the mill mud ash. It's mill mud ash combination. If it's a put on returns about 10 units of NI discount. The phosphorus is at least 2 years, depending on the starting values, and we knock a bit of probably about 20 units of potassium off as well, and that it's pretty conservative. You probably can go more, but like you said, it does come out in. It's not consistent, so that's why we've gone to the lower rates, I suppose.
I guess the analysis result coming back from the mud you get is like the mud you get from day to day has enough variation in it that when you do test, it's only a small indicator of what you're going to get anyway. So we do take a sample for Phil's trial, but there's a lot of variation across just within a week and that sort of stuff anyway.
Peter Larson, John, I don't know if you can hear me, John and Phil, Peter Larson, Wilmar. When you say 100 tonnes or 50 tonnes per hectare, is that 50 tonnes per hectare across the entire hectare, or just 50 tonnes per hectare in the banded zone?
No, 1 hectare of the paddock, 50 tonne goes on, so yeah, it's
in the banded zone, you're talking maybe 100 tonnes per hectare actually in that banded zone?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, yeah.
Right, thanks.
I think that's how it works.
Yes.
Yeah.
Phil, Sam Demora here, mate. You, with the ash down there in Mackay,